Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Twice as Lively with Ken Heckenlively. And this episode is likely to get quite lively because I will be using the expression bullshit a lot. Yes, when people try to convince you that certain things are true, I will call bullshit on it. So I'll probably be using the word bullshit a lot during this broadcast. So if you have sensitive ears or you have a problem with bullshit, maybe this isn't the episode you want to watch. But if you want to hear me using that word repeatedly, then this is probably the broadcast for you. So the title is The Most Secure Election in American History. But first, we're going to go with our simultaneous sip. Yes, again, I have wonderful Peet's coffee, which I recommend to everybody. It is a cafe Americano with a little bit of milk and a bunch of honey, because I like to be sweet, even when I'm being spicy. So get your beverage of choice. It is just a little before 9:30. So that means everywhere in America it is before 5 o'clock, which means hopefully your beverage of choice does not have alcohol in it. But if it does, I'm not going to be too judgy. So get your beverage of choice ready. Get ready for that wonderful sip. Ah, so delicious. So delicious. Okay, let's talk about bullshit. How do you know when something is bullshit? When the explanation offered, the words used are designed to cut off further debate. Let's go over some great expressions in history which are absolute bullshit. How about "I am not a crook" by President Richard Nixon before he left office in the Watergate scandal? Yes, that was designed to cut off discussion. How about "this vaccine is safe and effective," which came during the COVID crisis? Another thing we know is bullshit. Let's talk about former attorney Bill Barr saying of the Jeffrey Epstein death that it was a suicide and it resulted from a perfect storm of screw ups. That also is bullshit. And so I come to today's bullshit, which is the expression used in the wake of the 2020 election and shortly before, that it was the most secure election in American history. Yes, classic bullshit. So we call bullshit on that. So that sets the stage for today's broadcast, which I assume is going to be a little bit longer than normal because I have a lot of information. So my voice is probably going to run out on me. So I should probably take another sip of that wonderful Peet's coffee. And have I mentioned that you're looking very sexy today? Have you been working out? Did you get a new hairstyle? Have you been going to the gym more often than normal? Because something's different about you. And I just want you to know, I noticed. All right, as you know, President Trump gave his primetime address last night on Thursday, July 16th, 2026. And it was a speech of just a little over half an hour. And I have to say, he covered a lot of ground. And about a half an hour is about what you need for it. But in that half an hour, wow, did he cover a lot of ground. So, just so you can have a scorecard at home, I'm going to read this post from this X account, Probable Spam. I like that. That's, if you have a little bit of humor, that's always appreciated by the heck man. So let's go over what Trump alleged during his talk. Number one, 220 million election records were compromised by China. Two, the deep state downplayed the evidence. Three, China perpetrated other interference. Four, China influenced the 2018 and 2020 elections. Five, strategy included use of Chinese operatives inside U.S. corporations. Six, China wanted Trump to lose. Seven, China's activities included manufactured ballots in favor of Biden. Eight, knowledge of these activities was held from President of the United States Trump. Nine, a shadow government worked actively to conceal this information. 10, information was found in burn bags ordered by Obama to be destroyed. 11, burn bags were found likely due to incompetence. 12, Trump is ordering intel agencies to investigate these findings. 13, Americans were blatantly lied to ahead of all these facts and vulnerabilities. 14, documents are being released that prove U.S. officials knew of these compromises in our election infrastructure. 15, voter registration databases, election systems, and tabulation systems are all compromised and vulnerable to manipulation. 16, evidence of a plot to favor Maduro in Venezuela. 17, digital manipulation of elections without the ability to detect the evidence. 18, evidence buried and covered up. 19, large-scale voter corruption operation in Michigan. 20, affidavits of election officials in Michigan proving pay-to-play crimes. 21, Biden administration slow-walked all investigations. 22, investigations by the Department of Homeland Security with only 4 states showed in those 4 states that there were approximately 278,000 non-citizens voting in elections. That means we only have 46 other states to go. 23, China, Venezuela, and other countries were involved. 24, California's election just finished being counted more than 1 month after the election. I wonder why California needs a month to count the votes. 25, ABC and NBC refused to cover this announcement as they are involved in the plot. 26, great damage was done to our elections and therefore our country. This is a national emergency. 27, Trump administration is notifying states that were impacted, taking swift action. 28, Department of Homeland Security will make announcements tomorrow about potential issues and next steps prior to the midterms. 29, Department of Homeland Security is instructing states to remove ineligible voters. 30, Congress must pass the Save America Act urgently to mitigate these vulnerabilities. So I thank Probable Spam for listing all of those important points. So because I like to be fair and balanced, I am also letting you reviewing the New York Times. Trump released documents on China and the 2020 election. Here's what we know. Not surprisingly, the New York Times doesn't seem to think this is that big of a deal. So I'll just read the first 3 paragraphs because I think that's fair comment from the New York Times. President Trump started his speech on Thursday evening by outlining a series of claims about China's attempts to acquire American voter data, portraying the alleged activity as a historic scandal. But China's efforts to collect that data has been broadly known for years. Voter data is in many cases freely available to download on the internet and in other cases can be purchased. Possessing such data could reveal insights about American voters, but would not allow votes to be manipulated. Mr. Trump asserted that Beijing had carried out the largest compromise of election data in history, starting with the 2020 cycle, illicitly collecting 220 million voter files over a period of years. It was unclear precisely how the president arrived at that number, which could include names, addresses, and phone numbers, though the heavily redacted documents include a table that lists volumes of acquired records, including some 204 million records from 2016. China has hacked far more sensitive information, such as government personnel records, than what voter files would offer. So you got the New York Times saying, not a big deal. Okay, so I'm just letting you know what the two sides of the argument are. You've got the president saying that this is a big deal. You have the New York Times saying, not such a big deal. One of the things that Trump did that I thought was really good is he has released a number of documents on the White House website. So your beloved correspondent decided to go to that website. So you can go to whitehouse.gov and you can look at some of the documents. So let's just go to a couple things that they say. So they've got 4 sections. They've got vulnerabilities in electronic counting and ballot counting system, China's acquisition and exploitation of American voter data. They've got Michigan voter registration investigation. This showed that there were attempts to manipulate the vote in Michigan, which were not followed up. And then non-citizens on state voter rolls. So the landing page for this information kind of gives you a little bit of a summary of that. But then, because I am so thorough, I thought that you, the viewing public, would want to see some of these documents. So from the first section, vulnerabilities in electronic voting and ballot counting systems, the opening paragraph says this: China is probing the presidential campaign for opportunities to tailor collection and gather insight on policy positions on U.S.-Chinese issues. U.S. policy on China is a longstanding high collection priority for Beijing, and Chinese cyber actors have conducted such activities in every U.S. presidential election campaign since at least 2008. And then it talks about some of the things that they were doing. So there is talk about Chinese cyber actors sending tracking links suggesting that the Chinese operators are mapping out the target networks for follow-on approaches, and possibly including tasking campaign staffers' email accounts in the Chinese military signals intelligence system for collection. Tracking link collects such metadata as internet activity and system information that the operators can use to exploit the accounts. So China is looking at us really closely, okay? Probably the same kind of thing we're doing to them, but something we should be aware of. Next, China's acquisition of and exploitation of American voter data. So this is a little bit of a concerning document, not the least because a lot of it is blacked out. Okay, the first page, that's blocked out. Let's take a look at the second page. A lot blacked out. Let's read what we can. The PRC analysis on U.S. voter registration data from 18 states. Okay, so kind of doesn't make sense with the blacked out portions, but I'll read a little bit about this. It obtained from the blank voter registrations from the midterm elections. Types of information on U.S. registered voters contained personable identifiable information, and that would be used for mining on U.S. citizens, could be used as a resource to analyze, discover the identities of important U.S. targets. Information would be used to conduct U.S. general election analysis furthermore, continue state voter registration data. 3 of the documents also has a whole lot blacked out. But what we can read, some data included detailed historical records of detailed voter ballot and polling records and election donation expenses. Had such things as date of birth, all that regular information. Page 4, a whole lot blacked out. So, U.S. citizens apparently cannot understand what China is doing with our voter information. Okay, page 5, also blacked out. Voter registration information. The rest of the blank on U.S. citizens' occupations was a priority. And finally to page 6. Okay, a lot blocked out. So, what can we say? Well, seems like China's doing some bad things. Let's go to another document from that section on China's acquisition and exploitation of American voter data. So I always like summaries. You know, I like to get into the weeds of things, but summaries are good, especially for broadcasts like this. So it said, ahead of the 2020 presidential elections, China had extensive plans to utilize potential and cyber operations to sway public opinion against the Trump administration and international opinion against the US government. The China plans were designed to exploit US societal fissures and vulnerabilities, to influence US and other audiences, and by extension, US government decision making. The plans address several scenarios, including military conflict between the US and China, as well as other potential crises. The operation's themes covered a broad range of topics to exploit what China perceived to be US fissures and vulnerabilities, including economic recession, encouraging violent demonstration and looting to increase the appearance of social unrest. BLM, anybody? Black Lives Matter, the whole George Floyd protest. For those honest Americans who were swept up in that, maybe you want to think if you were being manipulated by Chinese actors. Next, intensifying Americans' disapproval of the President of the United States, calling into question his ability to govern. Overall, undermining the legitimacy and public support of the president and the United States. Next, ineffective COVID-19 response, increasing public dissatisfaction with the president of the United States by questioning his fitness to govern and undermining public support for his actions. The China virus, anybody? China had developed capabilities to project themes on these topics into social media via TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and others, as well as mainstream media through a variety of overt and hidden influencers and media contributors. In other words, China was paying US influencers and journalists to write stories critical of Trump and his administration. Now, were those influencers aware that it was Chinese money? No, I'm sure that China concealed where they were coming from. But when you are an influencer, it's very important to understand who may be influencing you. One of the options included gathering information on senior US government officials to influence public opinion on these officials. In other words, they're blackmailing, they're gaslighting you. Be aware of these things. So, just because it's in your media doesn't mean it's not foreign propaganda. And I would encourage you to be a little bit more skeptical about that. Okay, moving on to Michigan, there was this document, which was an email, apparently from a FBI agent, about the fact that even though the FBI's own investigation showed clear evidence of voter fraud and election irregularities, the Biden and his administration strangely decided not to prosecute. So I'll read the opening paragraph, I'll summarize the middle section of it, and then I will read the conclusion. So this was January 3rd, 2022. So this means that the FBI has had a significant amount of time in order to investigate these claims. So it's not just a knee-jerk shoot from the hip. Don't really know what I'm talking about. This is after a pretty serious investigation has been done. I've been unable to reach you by phone, so I thought it might be best to reach out to you via email. I am one of the agents assigned to the blank investigation out of FBI Detroit. We are preparing to close the investigation. Before we do so, I was hoping to discuss with you the limited scope that PIN approved into the investigations of the fraudulent voter registration applications. After reviewing federal prosecution of election offenses put out by the DOJ's Public Integrity Section, it appears as though this type of fraud would result in a full field investigation. So let me summarize. So this agent is saying that he was given a very narrow scope to look at, but even with that narrow scope, the information gathered by that point would have suggested a full field investigation. Was a full field investigation done? No, it wasn't. So the things that they found is that conduct that constitutes federal election fraud seemed to be satisfied. Also, under a section entitled False Information in and Payments for Registering and Voting, there seemed to be crimes committed. And so, in summing it up, the agent from FBI Detroit wrote, although it doesn't appear as paying on a per registration basis, it is reasonable for the canvassers to believe they would not keep the job if they weren't somewhat productive, and regardless of what they believed, they still submitted fraudulent voter registration applications. Okay, let me read that last sentence again. This is from an FBI agent who has been conducting an investigation of election violations in Michigan. They still submitted fraudulent voter registration applications. I understand that proving this was done willfully would still be difficult, but I wanted to raise my concerns before closing the case and was hoping to better understand the reason behind not approving a full investigation. Let me read that last line again, because that is a classic cover your ass CYA statement. Was hoping to better understand the reasoning behind not approving a full investigation. So this is an FBI agent who has conducted a preliminary investigation into alleged crimes. He finds evidence of those crimes, and yet his superiors choose not to prosecute. Smoking gun to me. Your mileage may vary. And finally, the last section, and you can find this document, Recognizing and Addressing Threats to Statewide Voter Registration Database. This is from the section on the White House website entitled Non-Citizens on State Voter Rolls. Executive summaries are something that I just love. I always like to go deep into the details. So if I was writing a book on this, I would really be going deep into all the details But since this is just a broadcast, I'm just going to go over the executive summaries and talk about what I think is coming next. So, from the executive summary, all right, you see this? Official document. Executive summary. Recently declassified records revealed that China breached multiple state voter registration systems prior to the 2020 election. So I want to stop you for a moment right there. What that means is China did more than just accessed publicly available information or bought information. They breached state voter registration systems. Unfortunately, this is not a new phenomenon. Unclassified reports from the last decade reveal that statewide voter registration databases, VRDB, are attractive targets for foreign adversaries. Hackers have attempted to breach voter registration systems in all 50 states, with confirmed success in at least 20 states. However, experts have routinely minimized the significance of successful voter registration breaches and the exposure of sensitive personal data used for voter verification. This failure to identify and accurately describe the potential threats makes U.S. elections less secure. State and local election officials must prioritize enhanced defenses to protect voter registration databases and to limit the ways that compromised data can be exploited. Steps should be taken to prevent bad actors from using stolen data to successfully obtain absentee ballots, alter voter registration information, or add and delete registrants. Implementing and maintaining safeguards is essential to protecting the electoral process and sustaining public confidence in elections. Next page of this document has a bunch of historical examples of when foreign actors have attempted to breach our political system. So you've got a bunch of stuff on Russia and China and other bad state actors. So it goes all the way to the next page. So the bad guys are attempting to influence our election. And it makes a lot of sense. Why would bad actors not want to influence the world's sole remaining superpower? Now, I say that because we are both a superpower militarily and we are a superpower economically. If you just think about the way the world has to work, the powers that are not as strong as America want to take America down. So we have clear evidence that foreign actors are attempting to interfere in our elections. So how should we as a country respond to that? Well, it's pretty clear that voting machines are vulnerable to being hacked by bad actors, especially state actors. So, number one, we should simply get rid of all voting machines. There is no evidence that I am aware of that voting machines make voting safer, that they allow for quicker tabulations of the votes. And I can't see any reason why anybody would have a voting machine. What is not hackable is in-person voting. Absentee voting is also vulnerable to hacking, especially when there are not requirements for ID verification. And so I find myself agreeing with President Trump that the only reason to have electronic voting machines or to have large numbers of mail-in ballots is for cheating. I am highly suspicious that my own lovely state of California is involved in election fraud, which would be wonderful for me as a Republican because Republicans are pretty much shut out of the California government on both the state and federal levels. It would be interesting to me to see what would happen if California had strong voter ID requirements. In fact, when I go and vote in California, just because I'm a troublemaker, I always put my driver's license in front of me as I'm telling them my address, going, here's my ID, just to hear that person behind the table get a look of absolute fear on their faces. And then they go, oh, no, 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 I don't want to see your ID. How can this be? If I'm going to go buy some alcohol, I need my ID. If I'm going to ask to get a senior citizen rate at the movies, I need my ID. If I go to the airport to get on a plane, I need an ID. If I go to rent a hotel room, I need an ID. If I'm going to rent a car, I need an ID. Why is it that one of the most important freedoms that we have, which is the vote, I don't have to prove who I am? So, voter ID, it's really important. And all of this stuff about, minorities, they don't have IDs. I'm sorry. Don't be racist. Minorities have IDs. Okay, so for those of you who may not get this, minorities buy alcohol at similar rates to white people. Minorities travel on planes at the same rate as white people. Minorities rent cars at the same rate as white people. Minorities rent cars at the same rates as white people. Okay, so I'm pretty clear that minorities have IDs just like white people do. So, no reason for everybody not to show their ID when they go to cast their sacred vote. In much the same way, they have to show their ID when they go on their sacred summer vacation. Okay, so where are we going with all of this? You may think that this is just about a Republican versus Democrat fight. But I'm going to give you something extra. This is why you come and listen to me. You come and listen to me for what's going to be happening 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road. So here's my big prediction. You may think that Trump is just setting up a fight with the Democrats for victory in the midterms. It's bigger than that. Here's the play you're not seeing right now. This gives Trump license to go after the Communist Party of China. The Communist Party of China, in Trump's belief, cost him the 2020 election. He's going to want payback. How is he going to squeeze the CCP? The Iran war. China gets most of its oil from Iran. What is going to happen when Trump either seizes Karg Island or shuts it down? Because we all know that's coming. The play is not Trump versus the Democrats. The big play here is Trump versus China. China, uh, Trump wants the Chinese CCP to fall. If you think he's just going after the mullahs in Iran, you're not seeing the play. Good old Trump, he's going after China, and it's appropriate that he does because the Communist Party of China are the greatest killers of humanity of any political system in history. From the time of Mao until the Tiananmen Square protests of 1989, the Chinese Communist Party has exerted tyrannical control over the Chinese people. If you think that Trump is just interested about freedom in Venezuela, freedom in Cuba, freedom in Iran, you aren't seeing the whole picture. Trump wants freedom in China. That's the big play here. So you heard it here first because I'm unaware of any other commentator saying that all of this election integrity controversy is setting up the assault against the Chinese Communist Party. So, for the butchers in Beijing, you might want to think about changing your behavior because I don't think you have a long time left in power. So those are my thoughts. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hopefully, this is not the best part of your day. Hopefully, the best part of your day is having interactions with people in the real world, not just good looking guys like me on the internet. So, have a great day, and I'll talk to you later.